Wait a minute, were they cheering for you? Okay. All right, thank you so much. I love being back in Philadelphia, and I think if some of you want to come up, there's a few chairs up here, and somebody can have mine that I just emptied, especially you ladies. Anybody pregnant? Sit down. I would like to say that traveling across the country is absolutely amazing to be able to see all the people that are still loving America and loving patriotism and loving freedom. Let me tell you, there is good news. We had our first CSPOA, Constitutional Sheriff and Peace Officer Association convention in Las Vegas on January 30th. We had about 90 sheriffs from all across the country, from 32 different states represented. And let me tell you, if you had been there, you would have expected to bump into any of the founding fathers at any time. You could feel the presence of freedom. You could feel the presence of American idealism in the room. The sheriffs were very engaged. We had county commissioners, we had deputies, we had sheriff candidates, we had chief deputies and undersheriffs, and 90 sheriffs from across the country who wanted to learn about all this. All of that movement was born out of a book that I wrote 3 years ago called The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope. Let me tell you, this is taking hold, my dear friends. None of you should be without this book, okay? Every American home should have this book in it. And was this written to sheriffs? No. It was written to the sheriff's boss. You. Okay? And you have to know what he's supposed to know. You have to know what he's supposed to know. And that's what that is. Okay? And there's probably another most valuable tool that you could get, and it's just, you know, your pocket constitution and the Victory for State Sovereignty, which you'll notice it has every state flag on it. This is a case that two small town sheriffs took all the way to the United States Supreme Court and won. Okay? This is the highlights of that case. You think that if there was ever a case that restored the 10th Amendment and the principles of freedom and state sovereignty, do you think you'd want to see that case? And that you might want to give it to your county commissioners so that they know the principle that I quote James Madison in this book: we can safely rely on the disposition of state legislatures to erect barriers against the encroachments of the national authority. There's a lot more than stinking judges you don't need. Okay? You don't need the EPA coming in and running your land. Okay? And believe it or not, the U.S. Supreme Court said the EPA was ruled to be unconstitutional in the early 1970s, and it's in this case. Just look at this case. It's page 12. I believe it's page 12. It's not page 12. It's page 11, and it goes over to 12. Okay. Absolutely get that. And then, why are we still believing in freedom? Obviously, you wouldn't be here today if you didn't. And I'm going to tell you why you do. Even though there might be the destruction of freedom all around us, and there is, I still believe that we can take America back peacefully, sheriff by sheriff, county by county, and state by state. If any of you still believe that there's hope in Washington, D.C. to restore God-given American liberty, then I've got beachfront property for you in Omaha. Okay? And I say that as a candidate for United States Congress. I'm running for Congress in Texas. Now, what Bolden said about needing cash, take that to the 10th power, because that's what I need. However, I am not going to, even if I were elected, which a lot of you have told me, we sure hope you don't get elected because we want you to keep doing what you're doing. I am not going to stop what I am doing. You know, Ron Paul has Campaign for Liberty. I will have Constitutional Sheriff Association, okay? the state sovereignty movement that I am a part of, I am not going to back away from that. Now, I am really afraid. Hang on just a second. Yes, dear. I'm speaking to a crowd of about 400 people. Okay, I'll tell him. I'll tell him. I'll tell him. Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you. She says she loves all of you and that she wants to make sure you make sure I have lunch today. All right. I actually answered that because I have a radio interview at 11 o'clock and my wife was reminding me of that interview. So I have to go really quick here. Is there hope? I'm here to tell you, I wish that every one of you would have been at that constitutional sheriff meeting. You would have left there so invigorated, so encouraged, so animated that the holy cause of liberty that we're all involved with today is real, it's tangible, it's reachable, and we're going to do this, my dear friends. We're going to have hundreds of sheriffs standing against the incursions of the federal government. That's a word that Justice Scalia uses in this case. Standing against the incursions of the federal government. There are so many stories about sheriffs right now. I've got to tell you about at least one of them. His name is Sheriff Brad Rogers. He's not too awfully far from here. Elkhart County, Indiana. Okay? And people have asked me, where should I move? I'll tell you what. If I was in a position of having to move, there would be maybe 3 counties I would choose. One of them would be Grant County, Oregon. Elkhart County, Indiana would probably be the first one on the list in the Midwest or anywhere close to here. Let me tell you what he did. He actually, at our Constitutional Sheriff Convention, he was one of our speakers. He also received the CSPOA Interposer of the Year. Do you want to be an interposer?
Yes.
Yeah. We were just talking about this. Interposing on behalf of the people, even if it's against federal law, even if it's against federal authorities, even if it's against the FBI, or even the worst organization on the face of the planet, the IRS. How are we going to protect ourselves? Is anyone in Washington, D.C. protecting you from these horrible agencies? These agencies now, my dear friends, believe that their bureaucratic policies supersede your right to pursuit of happiness. They also believe that their policies and regulations supersede the Bill of Rights. They believe it. And judges are backing them on that. And so, what do? Well, I compare what's going on today to Rosa Parks. Now, to me, and people have said, oh, well, the Rosa Parks thing was staged. I don't care. This is an amazing historical event that even the liberals are on our side on. They believe that she shouldn't have gone to jail. I say the same thing. We should have never heard of Rosa Parks. But this is such an amazing story that helps us. Because this is what happened on December 1st, 1955. A black woman in Montgomery, Alabama refused to obey the law. Isn't that wonderful? I'm on her side, totally. We are all on her side. And this is what happened. She refused to give her seat to a white man. That wasn't just a tradition. It was the law. She could have been lynched for this. And instead, she sat firm. And the bus driver gets in her face, and then she tells him to get lost. He gets off the bus, doesn't have a cell phone. And he had to get up, he had to use the payphone out on the street. And he called the sheriff's office. And a couple of deputies show up, handcuff her, take her to jail, fingerprint her, take her picture, and put her in a jail cell. She was later bailed out. In America. 1955. What should have happened that day? She was hauled off to jail by two people who swore in God's name that they would uphold, defend, protect, and preserve the United States Constitution. Yet she went to jail anyway. Today, I want you to ask, and this book asks the question, the magic of gun control. You see, it has to be magic. That's the only way it can work today. If it's magic, and all the other things are magicians. In fact, I made up a new word for this book. Polymagician. You know what that is. Those illusionists in Washington, D.C. that want you to believe that they have political magic. It's magic because everything that has failed in the past, they'll make it work today. You just got to believe in them and follow them. And if you do, you'll help destroy America as well. We are the generation, my dear friends, who are going to decide if we're going to continue to watch the destruction of our Constitution and our country, or if we're going to stand and take it back. Again, I will not be part of anything that is a violent overthrow of our government. I believe, without any question now, that the solution at hand, called state sovereignty and local autonomy, that we can take this back effectively and peacefully. If you get your sheriffs involved in this process, we will win. So, ask every sheriff you know, ask every peace officer you know, if you were called back into time, knowing what we know now about equality, fairness, freedom, liberty, and personal rights, knowing what we know now, you're called back to 1955 Montgomery, Alabama, 7 o'clock in the evening, and you're required to get on that bus and take care of this incident with Rosa Parks. What would you do? You're going to holler in, fuzz? You're going to teach her a lesson? You're going to show what we do with such lawlessness? I would hope that a constitutional sheriff would get on that bus with his deputy with him, walk up to Rosa Parks and say, "Ma'am, just what seems to be the problem here?" And she kind of swallows and looks up at him real big and says, "Why can't we just be left alone?" And the sheriff sits down next to her and he says, "You know what, Mrs. Parks? You're right." And he reaches over and he shakes her hand. And he says, "Ma'am, I want you to know what you did here tonight took a lot of courage, and I really admire you. It would be an honor for me and my deputy to escort you home safely." And they do. They take her home, and then while they're at her home, they ask Mr. Parks a question. "Mr. Parks, do you have a gun in the home?" Mr. Parks says, "Yeah, a 12 gauge. And the sheriff says, "Is it loaded?" And Mr. Parks says, "It doesn't do any good if it's not." And he says, "Good." He says, "My deputy is going to be giving you extra patrol in your home all night long. And throughout the coming week, every shift will be coming by your home, hopefully every 15 or 20 minutes. But we can't be here every minute. And if you need to exercise your Second Amendment rights, let your conscience be your guide." My dear friends, that is a constitutional sheriff. Sheriff does the same thing today for Rosa Parks, the gun owner, or Rosa Parks, the homeschooler, or Rosa Parks, oh, for God's sakes, no, the Amish farmer who deals in raw milk. Yeah. And Sheriff Brad Rogers did just that. You see, David Hostetler was being harassed by the FDA. And they were coming onto his property, and an Amish farmer is very welcoming, and very submissive. And he told the FDA, "Come on in. Do your inspections. Spot inspections. Completely a violation of the Fourth Amendment." But they come in anyway. He said, "Come in, so that's voluntary." And he passed every inspection with flying colors. They even took some of his milk and did a scientific analysis on it. A rating. Everything's fine. Did they stop? Oh, no. They didn't stop. So now they want to take this David Hostetler Amish farmer, and I don't care if it's an atheist farmer. You're an American, you have the right to do your own thing. And I have the right, as a citizen and a potential customer, to go buy his milk if I want to drink it. And I've done it before. And I'll do it again. So the FDA now wants to take him before a grand jury in Detroit. How's the Amish farmer going to get there? By buggy. Okay? So the Amish farmer calls the sheriff and he says, I'm tired of this. I don't want any more of this harassment. And the sheriff says, I'm going to end this. Are you with me? He says, whatever you have to do, sheriff. So the sheriff sent a letter to the FDA. Said, if you come back on this man's property without probable cause, due process, or a duly signed warrant, I will arrest you for trespassing. So David Hostetler says fine, and Sheriff Rogers sent the notice. What do you think the FDA did? They tried to one-up him. So they got a hold of their lawyer, and their lawyer sent a notice back to Sheriff Rogers. Said, if you interfere with the FDA, we will arrest you for a felony. See? They got to one-up him. Because the misdemeanor trespass, and now they want to threaten him with a felony. So Rogers calls me, and we talk about this. And he said, Sheriff, I got to tell you, I'm not intimidated by this at all. And I said, good. And we prepared a response to the FDA, and we sent it. And in 3 days, the FDA sent Mr. Hostetler a certified letter saying that everything had been dropped. Hey, it's done deal now. Now can they go back up? Can they go back and go after this Amish farmer again? Sure. State agencies are doing this. FDA is doing this nationwide, and they're even sending in FDA SWAT teams after some of these Amish farmers. True story. Absolute true story. They're also sending in Department of Education SWAT teams on people. You can see that on YouTube. We talked about this at our sheriff's convention. You can see this. A Department of Education, they borrowed a SWAT team because somebody had not paid their student loan. So a SWAT team collection agency for the federal government. All these things are... How do we stop these things? Sheriff by sheriff, county by county. How do we protect the Flam family who had got a fine for having a Bible study at their home in California, in Orange County? County by county, sheriff by sheriff. A sheriff just goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission. You fine these people $300. Why did you do that when they're merely exercising their right to freedom of religion? Do not do that again. Let me see the fine that you gave them. Let me see the paperwork. Rips it up and gives it back to him and says, never do that again. And if you do, I'll take action against you. Do you think Planning and Zoning is going to do that again? Of course not. And I'm telling you, the federal government, I know from personal experience, does not want to fight with your sheriff. And if we get hundreds of sheriffs like that in this country, uniting together, a bunch of Sheriff Brad Rogers, a bunch of Sheriff John Lopez in California, a bunch of Sheriff Glenn Palmer in Oregon. Get those guys together. We just did in Las Vegas on January 30th. They all got together and they said, we've got to do this more. Give us more. We want to know how we get the federal government to get off our land. Utah right now is in a big fight to try to take back their land. That's exactly what we should be doing. This isn't their land. Do you know how much land the federal government claims they own? It's not theirs. In my county, where I was sheriff in Graham County, they own 95% of the county. How absurd and ridiculous. In Arizona, they own 85% of Arizona, 87% of Nevada. And it's crazy out there in the West. New Hampshire, 2%. Yeah.
Croc TV.